Michaela, thank you so much for taking time to chat with me this morning. So I'm doing a series looking at how the outdoors influences our mental health in a positive way. And I'd come across one of your articles that you'd written about ecotherapy. And I thought, whoa, that sounds very interesting. So that's why I have you on today, to maybe if you can tell us a little bit about it and a little bit about yourself as well. So, Michaela, first of all, before we go into sort of what ecotherapy is and even some of the theory around that, just tell me a little bit about yourself and where you've come from, and even what inspired you to get involved with ecotherapy.
Okay. Well, for me, Linda, it was very much intuition first. It was my own experience that was the catalyst and the motivator. My own history of mental health, mental wellness, illness, everything in between. I lost my sister to suicide when I was 16 and she was 18. It was obviously a significant trauma. Before that, I had emigrated to Australia as a young child. So my formative years were all spent outdoors. I was barefoot, I was in the bush. I was either barefoot in the outback or I was swimming. They were the only two environments that I ever was in. So when I experienced that trauma, that significant trauma, and then went very quickly to London, where within 3 months of my sister's death, I was I've gone from rural Ireland to inner city London. I had my son very young, only less than 2 years after my sister died. So there was all this change of environment very quickly and a lot of pressure. So within 2 years, I was a single parent living in a housing estate in London and struggling, definitely struggling. And I came home. Now, there's a lot of layers of life experience that added to my experience of the world and my reactions emotionally, which I think were natural. When I sought help because I was struggling, I was diagnosed with depression and I was prescribed medication. This set in motion 20 years of mental health diagnoses and medication. It went from depression to a severe recurring depressive disorder to depression with anxiety. Then eventually I was re-diagnosed as bipolar. I was experiencing not only the crippling lows of not being able to get up or get out, the feelings of emptiness, worthlessness, self-loathing was a core belief. The self-loathing was unbearable. Then I began to also experience what's described as hypomania and psychosis, full-blown psychosis, delusions, hallucinations. It was just, and every time my mental health became worse, my prescription increased. The response was always a medical one. Now, in fairness, I did also receive counselling. I did see psychotherapists. I also utilised, within the community, support groups and such. I was what would be described, if it's possible, a very proactive, depressed person in that I wanted nothing more than to get well. I would have done anything to get better. So whilst I was doing all of this, it seemed that the more I did, there was something missing. Do you know, I took the medication, I did the counselling, I went to the psychotherapist, I did everything that they were telling me to do. But I felt like I just couldn't get better. Now, whilst that was happening, my career background is in mental health education. I worked for 25 years, mostly in the community sector, devising and delivering mental health training, because my belief was always in education as empowerment. My belief was always that you do with someone, you don't do to someone. You know, you educate, you empower, and they then are the agent of their own recovery. The Personal experience, I would say, was a lot of trauma, loss, grief, and isolation and stress. These were things that there were other life experiences. There was a lot of loss. I lost my mother very young, my father relatively young, my sister was already passed away. There was difficult family dynamics in childhood. There was a lot there. And what I believe now was my emotional response was an absolutely natural one. But the treatment was primarily medical. That was the first port of call, was medication. So whilst this was happening, the career path was mental health. That's what I cared about. That's what inspired, interested me. So in my role as a education officer, and at one stage training and education officer for the Western Trust for Aware, I devised and delivered mental health training programs. It was all about education, empowering people. So when I asked the question, what helped? There was one answer that kept coming back that I wasn't seeing reflected in services. And that was, when I get out a good walk, if I can get over to the park, it's my wee dog. I just love my wee dog. It's gardening. See if I can get out and turn the soil. That helps me. Fishing. When I get out in the river for a couple of hours, everything just calms. It was nature. Nature was a theme that without direction, without them being told that this was good for them, this is what people were telling me they were drawn to in a very intuitive way. They were drawn to nature for their mental health when they needed to ease any kind of stress. So with this awareness, again, I kind of looked back at services and said, well, in the 25 years I've been in services, nobody has ever asked me, are you outdoors? Do you have any connection with nature? I had been asked about exercise. What's probably relevant also is, prior to this, I spent time in the leisure industry. I was an aerobics instructor, a gym instructor, I lifeguarded. So whilst exercise is hugely beneficial, we know this, that was asked of me, but that was all indoors. So when I say there was a piece missing, I ate healthily, I exercised, I was learning, I was educating myself, I was eating self-help books. I was going through self-help books at a rate of knots. Nobody ever asked, do you get out much? Do you spend much time in nature? I reviewed my own history of mental health and illness and saw a very definite correlation between where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do when I was feeling under pressure, when I was feeling distressed, when I was feeling depressed. And it was in London, I wanted to go to Hampstead Heath. When I was in Derry, I wanted to walk the dog outside the city on the country roads. I spent time with a friend who had a farm in Limavady. The more stressed I felt, the more I wanted to be on the farm. Yeah. When I came back into where I lived, the housing estate, I started to, I could feel it. I feel myself go, ugh. And at around the same time, I decided, and it was a very conscious decision, to tune in to my intuition and what my intuition was telling me I needed to do to get better, to recover, to heal. And my intuition was telling me I needed nature and I needed to slow down. Because the other side to this is, through the work and the study, I've always been a perfectionist, which is considered a predisposition for mental health issues, especially depression and bipolar. Yes. So this slowing down and being in nature was a very conscious decision. I spent my time gardening. I spent my time hill walking. I spent my time sea swimming. I wrote. this is another very important part, is creativity and mental health. It's my opinion that the medication that I had dampened and dulled my creativity. It's my opinion that my creativity is one of my greatest protective factors. And to take that away was counterproductive to me ever getting well. I need to be creative. I need to write. When I was heavily medicated, I couldn't, and I didn't. So I tuned into my intuition. I immersed myself in nature. I did it carefully. I did it slowly. I did it gradually. I reduced all of my medications until I was on none. Now, I had been at one time on an antidepressant, a mood stabilizer, an anti-anxiety, an antipsychotic, and a sleeping medication daily. And that was considered a maintenance dose. That was what was considered necessary for me to function in this world. I have now been medication free for 5 years. My mental health has never been better. My physical health has never been better. And I need to be careful with the message. I am not advocating that, oh, just stop taking my tablets and go for a walk, I'll be grand. That is not what I'm advocating. I did this very carefully and with an awful lot of kind of educational background around mental health, very tuned into where I was up to. I had spotters, I had people in my life that knew what I was doing, reducing my medication. I had given them a certain amount of responsibility that if you notice, and I'm not noticing, for you to intervene. So essentially what I was doing was I was applying ecotherapy to my own recovery. I didn't know that's what I was doing. I didn't know that there was such a thing as ecotherapy. I was talking about nature therapy. I didn't know that this was, if you like, a discipline. And I became aware of a program based in Donegal called Solace. Now, Solace is a HSE program, and it uses ecotherapy and a model of walking, talking in green spaces for mental health recovery. So again, the professional and the personal were kind of, going in parallel. I became aware of this. Again, just as fate would have it, Solace opened a second service in Inishowen, where I had moved to, where I was living. And so I was employed by Solace on a part-time basis. So now I had my personal experience that nature absolutely healed me. No doubt about it. I had the anecdotal evidence of 25 years working with people in emotional distress and them telling me that nature was so important. And now I had a paid professional role with the HSE program in ecotherapy. So now I had a professional framework that reiterated and confirmed all of what I had believed to be true. The work that I do now in facilitation, and it's exactly what we're speaking about, is that I'm always very clear that I'm not the therapist. Nature is the therapist. I'm not really doing anything. But the need for facilitation is to motivate people to do it by giving them a time, a place, and connection. Because especially when someone's struggling with their mental health, and I've been there, I know what it's like, to lie on the sofa for an entire day, and you do want to get up. You know that it would be better if you went for a walk. But the motivation to actually get up, get dressed, get out is really, really difficult. And that's that has to be understood and acknowledged that it is difficult. For a person to have the motivation and the wherewithal, I'm going to get up and go and do a hike today, that's difficult.
Yeah.
That's really difficult.
Yeah.
Whereas if they connect in with myself in the groups, I just have to be at that point at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
That's all I have to do.
Yeah.
Once I'm there at 10 o'clock, everything will be taken care of. I'm also a great believer in meeting people where they're up to.
Mm.
Now, personally, I hike, I sea swim, I forest bathe. That's where I'm up to at the minute. For some people, to plant a wee tomato plant and have it on their windowsill to nurture that plant, that is a connection with nature. So that's where a lot of my work currently is, around accessibility and finding where a person's up to and helping them to reconnect with nature in whatever way is comfortable and whatever way works for them. There is a way for everybody.
Michaela, thank you so much for just taking time out to chat. What I'll do is I'll put your details underneath the description of the video, so if anybody wants to make contact with you, they can.
Thank you.
And yeah, so it's been lovely. Thank you so much.